Back to the Future is not like other movies. It's special. In fact, I'd say it's a perfect movie. The movie is unlike anything else because it doesn't waste a single scene or moment. As soon as it begins, the wheels of magic start moving and every frame you see has a clear focus and reason for why it exists. There is so much foreshadowing going on to the point of dozens of small details that you will only notice on your second viewing. There is not a single thing here that has not been planned thoroughly or does not play some sort of role in the story.
And only Dr. Brown can help him get back to the future.
Are you telling me that this sucker is nuclear? Precisely.
One of the coolest parts of this movie, aside from the story, are the visuals and its aesthetic. I mean, this movie literally almost defines an entire decade. The night shots are full of strong neon colors, purple, red, and blue. You've got 80s posters, aerobics classes, and Huey Lewis playing in the background, as well as judging the school bands.
Are you telling me that it's 8:25?
Precisely.
Damn. I'm late for school.
Love is a curious thing. Need money, don't take fame. Don't need no credit.
These visuals are exactly what people today imagine when they think about the 80s, especially Marty's outfit in his sneakers and Walkman. It's iconic and even timeless to a certain extent. And of course, then there's the DeLorean, which is a character of its own in this movie. Before Back to the Future, the car was not popular, nor was it considered good. It sold awfully and didn't drive that well either, which is something even the movie makes fun of. But goddammit did it look cool. It might be a crap car, but its design looks awesome and extremely 80s as well as futuristic, which is the main reason why it was picked to be the time machine in this movie. It simply looks like it's a secret spaceship that will fly to Mars any minute now. And it's this design coupled with the rest of the aesthetic of this movie that has been immortalized by pop culture. I mean, 90% of synthwave or 80s inspired modern art literally features the DeLorean or some kind of Back to the Future reference. Part of why that is, aside from just visually looking cool, is because Bob Gale and Robert Zemeckis tried to make the movie as timeless as possible. Sure, it's clearly an 80s movie, but it's also shot in a way that isn't reliant on the 80s. It could easily take place in 2025 and it wouldn't feel out of place. They did the same thing in Back to the Future 2, where they did their best to portray the future as down to earth and realistic as possible without trying to predict anything too crazy like you see in other futuristic movies.
Shark still looks fake.
In fact, a lot of the things they showed in the second movie, things that were just fantasy back then, are actual reality today, which is just crazy. Marty McFly is extremely relatable and likable because he's not your average action hero. He's just a teenager who is filled with anxiety, hopes, and dreams and is trying to make the best out of what he has, which is a shitty family but an amazing girlfriend and talent for music and skating.
But you're good, Marty. You're really good. And this audition tape of yours is great. You've got to send it into the record company.
His family is not the worst by any means, nor are they in any way abusive, but the movie makes it clear that all of them, except Marty, are just people who failed in life and are now stuck together and have to make the best out of it. Marty himself is not a failure yet, but based on how things are going, the movie was implying that he was heading in that direction, especially when he starts mimicking his dad on how he can't handle a rejection.
What if they say, get out of here, kid, you got no future? I mean, I just don't think I can take that kind of rejection. Jesus, I'm starting to sound like my old man.
What if she said no? I don't know if I could take that kind of a rejection.
A rejection that he got from Huey Lewis playing a Huey Lewis song.
Hold it, fellas. I'm afraid you're just too darn loud.
It's really the events of the movie that change him and give him a new perspective on life. In fact, in a way, this entire trip to the past and back was sort of like a near-death experience if you think about it. Before he traveled to 1955, he was basically failing in life and his hopes and dreams were slowly shattered. But afterwards, he became highly motivated and even decided to send his demo tape to a record company, as the envelope in his hand at the end of the movie implies. His family is a great way for the movie to introduce us to Marty's parents and to show us their personalities as adults. His dad, George, is highly insecure, introverted, and just not good at confrontations.
This just happens to be my supervisor, and I'm afraid I'm just not very good at confrontations.
His mom, Lorraine, is an alcoholic who's bitter she married George, and she has some very outdated and old school ideas on dating, which ends up being pretty ironic coming from her.
Girls chasing boys. When I was your age, I never chased a boy or called a boy or sat in a parked car with a boy.
It's a great idea. I'd love to park. Oh, Marty, I'm almost 18 years old. It's not like I've never parked before.
What?
And he can sleep in my room.
I gotta go. Thanks. Gee, you smoke too?
Marty, you're beginning to sound just like my mother.
Boy, that escalated quickly. I mean, that really got out of hand fast.
The scene that follows when Marty meets Doc at the Twin Pines Mall parking lot might be one of the greatest character introductions ever made. Not only are we introduced to Doc Brown, who looks like a more insane version of Albert Einstein, but we are also introduced to the real star of the movie, the DeLorean. It's an iconic scene, the way it's shot and presented as if we are literally about to meet some aliens or otherworldly beings, to the car gracefully driving out of the truck and looking like a spaceship. What's also simply genius is how instead of Doc going on a long monologue explaining the function of the time machine, we first see it in action without really being told what's about to happen.
When this baby hits 88 miles per hour, you're gonna see some serious shit.
Wait a minute, Doc. Are you telling me that you built a time machine out of a DeLorean?
We are just as confused as Marty, trying to understand what just happened. It's only after the DeLorean comes back does the movie explain how it works, and even that is done in a very simple and clear way. So many movies featuring time travel always feel the need to dump a whole load of exposition on you, explaining every single detail on how their time travel works. Back to the Future does none of that. They show us the DeLorean in action, give us some basic infos on how this movie's version of time travel works, and we're all set for the adventure. It's genius.
This readout tells you where you're going, this one tells you where you are, this one tells you where you were. You input your destination time on this keypad.
It's also amazing how a lot of minor details end up playing a massive role for Marty's trip to the past. Like if Doc hadn't told him about how he got the idea of the flux capacitor, Marty would have been in deep trouble and stuck. And it seems so insignificant when he first tells the story, like a random fact, and then it ends up playing such a vital role.
Flux capacitor.
Flux capacitor?
It's taken me almost 30 years of my entire family fortune to realize the vision of that day.
I came here in a time machine that you invented. Now I need your help to get back to the year 1985. You were standing on your toilet and you were hanging a clock and you fell and you hit your head on the sink. And that's when you came up with the idea for the flux capacitor.
When Marty gets to 1955 by accident after fleeing the Libyan terrorists, we get to see Hill Valley in a completely different light, and just like Marty, we're both amazed and bewildered at what's going on. The 50s seem like a completely different world where everything looks familiar, but it's still different. It's not even clear if all of this is real or maybe just a dream or some kind of vintage festival. It's only when Marty notices the still functioning clock tower does he slowly start to understand that he traveled back in time. It's amazing how this all plays out because no one really talks much here. It's all following the principle of show, don't tell, and the movie also doesn't treat the viewers as little children that need every detail to be explained. The way it shows Hill Valley and focuses on certain landmarks is explanation enough to understand everything. The same thing can be said about when Marty meets George in the diner and slowly realizes that he's sitting next to his young dad.
Hey, McFly! What do you think you're doing? What?
It also makes you wonder if you would have ever been friends with your parents when they were young. I mean, this entire movie's idea comes from one of the directors when he found his dad's old school yearbook and then wondered whether or not he would have gotten along with his dad. It's here where Marty also starts to interfere with the past, influencing Goldie to become mayor, and later he saves his dad from being run over by a car, which also happened to be the car of his grandparents. In the original timeline, Lorraine's dad hit George with the car, and Lorraine felt sorry for him and for some reason fell in love with George. But now this happened to Marty, which ends up screwing the timeline and causing him and his family to slowly be erased from existence. It's wild, and Marty clearly has an issue coping with that, especially with slowly realizing that his mom has the hots for him.
My name is Lorraine. Lorraine Baines?
Yeah. Calvin, why do you keep calling me Calvin?
Well, that is your name, isn't it? Calvin Klein? It's written all over your underwear.
Eventually, Marty and Doc find a way for him to get back to the future, and it's just hilarious how happy Doc is about being able to take part in one of the most dangerous experiments of his entire life that builds on the hope that Marty will be able to drive the DeLorean fast enough and touch the lightning pole to get back to his time. And Marty needs to touch it with the DeLorean exactly on time, within 1 second, or else he crashes into the building in front of him. More hilarious than this is that everyone here is constantly in a time rush. You know, in a movie about time travel, and when Doc's name is Emmett Brown, which if spoken backwards sounds like the word time. Simply genius. He's an amazing character because you never know what wild and crazy thing he will come up with next. Like when he recreates the model of Hill Valley that is very accurate and then apologizes for its crudeness. But I think the best part about him are his over-the-top reactions to events, which is even wilder in the second movie. According to him, every interference in time, no matter how minor, could lead to a catastrophic event such as the explosion of the entire universe, or nothing at all could happen. Either way, best not to try your luck.
Doc, what do you mean? I foresee two possibilities. One, coming face to face with herself 30 years older would put her into shock and she'd simply pass out. Or two, the encounter could create a time paradox, the result of which could cause a chain reaction that would unravel the very fabric of the space-time continuum and destroy the entire universe. Granted, that's a worst-case scenario. The destruction might in fact be very localized, limited to merely our own galaxy.
Meanwhile, Marty tries his best to get his dad and mom back together so he won't fade out of existence. And just when he thinks he finally did it and convinces his dad to pick up Lorraine after haunting his dreams as Darth Vader, Bill and his goons show up to screw things up. Biff is a great character because the actor plays him so well. He's the stereotypical bully, but because of how dumb he sometimes is, he almost feels like a lovable bully. Like you want to see him get his ass kicked, but at the same time you love seeing him anytime he's on screen. Which Marty decides to do, and it's here where we get to see some of his early character flaws that will also play an important role in the sequels. Marty is a hothead and usually first gets into trouble and asks questions later, which gets him into all kinds of situations like the one here, where he has to run away from Biff and his goons after sucker punching him to help his dad.
Now,
Whoa, Biff. What's that?
The scene is just shot so damn well, and it makes you feel for Marty because he's trying to help George, but at the same time he can't even explain to him why he's constantly hanging out with him or pushing him so hard to get together with Lorraine. It's also here where Marty basically invents skateboarding and introduces us to the first running gag of the trilogy. Biff crashing into loads of manure. The comedy elements in this movie are reactionary rather than relying on gags. Everything happening here feels natural, and it doesn't seem like the movie is even trying to be funny. It just so happens that Marty ends up in hilarious situations all the time. I love that Back to the Future does all of that without shoving it in your face. It never lingers too long on a joke or a situation. Things just happen and then the events move on. Like when Marty finally gets his dad to stand up to Biff and knock him out hard, which seems like someone simply standing up to a bully, but ends up being a life-changing experience for both George and Marty. George never stood up to someone in his entire life until he met Marty.
No, Biff. You leave her alone.
All right, McFly.
Marty keeps casually interfering with time and history and even ends up inventing rock and roll towards the end of the movie, which is another thing that's just done masterfully by the writers. Early on we get to see Marty as a rock fanatic and even him auditioning for his school's dance with his band. The movie doesn't really go too deep into this and is just used to give his character a bit of a rebellious edge. But then towards the end, the fact that he's able to play guitar ends up playing an extremely crucial role, to the point of it even being life-saving for him.
The hell are you doing to my car?
Hey, beat it, Spook. This don't concern you.
Who you calling Spook, Peckerwood? Hey, man, the dance is over. Unless you know somebody else that can play the guitar.
This just gives me goosebumps every time because this is masterclass level of writing. And when Marty then ends up playing rock and roll and Johnny Be Good while also hitting that guitar like a lot of famous 70s and 80s rock musicians,
Watch me for the changes and try and keep up, okay?
you just can't help but get your mind blown and be amazed. Of course he ends up going overboard and completely wild on the guitar, but as someone who plays guitar too, I would lie if I said that I wouldn't do the exact same thing in his shoes. And at least now we all know where Chuck Berry got the inspiration for his most iconic song.
Your cousin, Marvin Berry? You know that new sound you're looking for? Well, listen to this!
The last half of the movie might be one of the best parts in my opinion. When Marty gets back to Doc with barely enough time left, the entire set is drenched in neon, purples and blues, and this is where its 80s DNA shines through. Even though this part still takes place in the 50s, the scene looks exactly how modern pop culture imagines the 80s to look like. And of course, Murphy's Law kicks in and everything that can go wrong goes wrong. Doc's cables get loose, the DeLorean stops working, and the tension is at an all-time high.
Here we go. This time, come on. Come on.
I have seen this movie 1,000 times at this point. For some reason, I rewatch it every year around Christmas or New Year's. It has turned into a personal tradition, and the movie still feels fresh to me. When the tension here is high, I keep being glued to the screen, hoping for the DeLorean to get back to the future, despite knowing the outcome. Back to the Future is one of those movies that is timeless and will simply never get old. The jokes work no matter what decade you're watching it in, and the plot is filled with tons of details, references, and Easter Easter eggs. It's rightfully seen as one of the greatest movies ever made, and in my opinion, it is the greatest movie ever made, or at the very least, the greatest sci-fi time-traveling movie. Everything here has been thought through to the fullest, and there's nothing out of place or redundant taking away screen time. Even more so, the sequels are a rare case where both the second and third movie managed to keep the quality of the first one and be just as good. I would even consider Back to the Future 2 to be slightly better than the first one.
Hey, Doc, we better back up. We don't have enough road to get up to 88. Road? Well, we're going. We don't need road.
Great Scott! What? Great Scott! Great Scott!
Lethal Weapon is one of the best movies to come out of the 80s and easily one of the best movies ever made. It had a massive influence on filmmaking and especially the body cop genre. It's the reason why that genre got so popular, and it turned Mel Gibson from a well-known actor into a worldwide star almost overnight. The impact Lethal Weapon had can still be felt in modern movies and TV shows despite being 30 years old at this point.
What you got in there? 4-inch Smith? A lot of old timers carry those.
The bad guys don't stand a chance.
But I want you to go and see my new hit movie, Lethal Weapon. I love this job, and everybody likes me in it. You know, I do a pretty good movie. Oh, he's in it.
Raj, meet your new partner.
Yeah, danger, excitement.
Mel Gibson, Danny Glover, Lethal Weapon, rated R.
What I like the most about Lethal Weapon is the amazing atmosphere and stylistic design choices that can be felt throughout the entire movie. It came out in 1987 and you feel and see that in every single scene, line of dialogue or soundtrack. It is a product of its time and managed to capture that decade perfectly. It has a lot of neo-noir detective influences, starting from the plot where two cops have to uncover a murder committed by a secret drug trafficking group, all the way to a lot of scenes being complemented by a heavy, lonely saxophone playing smoothly in the background. The sax is actually extremely prominent throughout the movie and clearly has a life of its own. In fact, you can even remove all the dialogue and simply play the movie with only the saxophone for sound and it would still make perfect sense. It's that good. The 80s loved this type of soundtrack, but Lethal Weapon went all in and doubled down hard on it, inviting Eric Clapton to complement it with his insane guitar skills. It's a masterpiece, and there are very few other movies, especially within the same genre, that come close to such an iconic and amazing sound. But this sound, the saxophone, impacts the perception of this movie. It heavily influences your mood when watching it, and it even goes so far and say that the movie wouldn't work without it. Each scene feels like it has more weight to it, while the sax quietly plays in the background, and it also sets the feeling for each scene, be it sad, full of action or comedy. Because this movie is the perfect mix between action, comedy and drama. It knows when to let the characters get into a dangerous situation that lets us fear for their lives, but at the same time has a great sense of humor to it that also doesn't take away from all the sad and horrible things happening on and off screen.
You ever met anybody you didn't kill?
Well, I haven't killed you yet.
You really like my wife's cooking?
No.
Lethal Weapon is a perfect example of a movie that knows how to mix multiple genres without feeling like it's trying too hard or is out of place. And that blends very well with the atmosphere of this movie, because it definitely is a product of its time in a very good way. The scenes are often dark but full of neon, red lights, and Los Angeles is shown in a dark and moody way. Despite Lethal Weapon being a body cop action movie with some really great fight choreography and action scenes, it's also kind of a quiet movie. And I'm sure you know exactly what I mean if you've ever seen it. Despite the great soundtrack, it's not like the music is playing constantly or being too overpowering or distracting. In fact, if anything, most of the scenes are calm and quiet with not much happening except Murto and Riggs talking or being lost in their thoughts. It's almost relaxing, especially compared to a lot of other action movies from the 80s or even modern ones that feel the need to constantly overstimulate you with non-stop action, which of course doesn't have to be a bad thing if done well, but it's still refreshing when a movie gives you some room to breathe and also takes things slow, because Lethal Weapon heavily relies on the mystery of its plot, doing its best to let you and the main characters wonder what's actually going on and slowly uncovering the truth.
Read 'em and weep. What do you do? Sleep with that thing on your pillow? I would if I slept.
Murder and Riggs are some of the most memorable 80s characters. To me, they define the entire body cop genre, despite it existing before Lethal Weapon. But no other movie managed to portray this character dynamic as flawlessly as this movie. Both get great introductions where we see their character traits and personalities. Murdo being close to retirement and somewhat of an older, more experienced and tired cop, versus Riggs, a crazy, almost suicidal cowboy type. At least, that's what the movie wants us to think when we first meet them, and it soon becomes obvious that there's more to them and they are much deeper characters than they might seem at first glance. I especially love the dynamic Riggs has with Murto, where everything is pointing in the direction of Riggs being suicidal and a potential danger to his partner, the case they're investigating, and people around him in general.
I can handle it. You qualified to talk to jumpers? I've done it before. Okay, you're elected. No bullshit. You want to kill yourself? Oh, for Christ. Shut up! Yes or no? You want to die? Yes or no? How? Yes. Oh, what do you want to hear, man? Do you want to hear that sometimes I think about eating a bullet? Huh? Well, I do. You shouldn't tempt me, man. Put it in your mouth. Bullet might go through your ear and not kill you. Yeah, under the chin. Yeah. I'm too old for this shit.
But as events keep unfolding, we find out more about him and his tragic backstory that lets us feel a lot more sympathy for him and at least understand him a bit better. If he was indeed planning to off himself, then meeting Murto and working on the Hunsaker case changed his life fundamentally. It gave him a new purpose and a mystery to solve, even if just prolonging his personally perceived suffering for a few more days or weeks. The best part of Lethal Weapon are the interactions between these two guys. It's what's holding the whole movie together and why it's so much fun to watch. Despite the fact that they just met in the most hilarious way possible.
Raj, meet your new partner.
You already feel like they've been best friends for decades. Mel Gibson and Danny Glover simply have an amazing screen presence and chemistry together. This, coupled with their characters being the polar opposites of each other, all you want to do is just watch them interact for 24 hours straight. I mean, seriously, even if the movie had an awful story or soundtrack, just watching Danny Glover and Mel Gibson sit in a car and argue about whether or not he's too old for this shit would be pure gold and Oscar worthy in my world.
All I can buy because my partner has a death wish. Fucking life is over. Just shut up, yeah? Watch. Don't worry. You know, I was driving before you were itching your daddy's pants.
Maybe we'll stay alive long enough for me to buy you a present.
There are few other movies that have such a great dynamic between the main characters, even though many have tried. Lethal Weapon influenced the body cop genre in massive ways. After its release, the genre seemed to be flooded with movies trying to capture the magic and success this movie had. And some of them definitely came close and ended up being great movies, but most of them felt like cheap imitations without much substance. The best part about Lethal Weapon is how fresh it feels. I mean, the movie is 30 years old at this point and it has every single 80s trope you can imagine, but it doesn't feel outdated or unwatchable. In fact, it's so good, it probably would have been a success even if it came out today. It's a classic movie that will always feel fresh and original even 20 years from now.
Have a nice day.
Rambo First Blood Part 2 is easily one of the most important action movies ever made. It heavily influenced 80s action, creating a whole genre of movies and tropes which can still be felt and seen even in modern cinema. It changed the way we view the genre and is considered one of the best examples of a golden era hardcore 80s action movie. It gave birth to countless sequels, parodies, knockoffs, imitations, and inspirations. But more importantly, Rambo, and in particular his archetype of character, got so deeply absorbed into pop culture that you can still see people reference it in modern movies, TV shows, comedy, and even day-to-day life.
And now, he's getting out any way he can.
Stallone created one of the most iconic characters ever made, up there with his portrayals of Rocky or Cobra.
You have the right to remain silent.
The thing that most people don't seem to realize about the early Rambo movies, and especially about Rambo 2, is the fact that these types of action movies weren't as common in the early 80s as people might think, and when they finally did start being made in droves, they were often either heavily criticized for their excessive violence or outright censored. When the first two Rambo movies came out, they were under a lot of fire from critics and especially conservative Christian groups, claiming that these movies are too gory, violent, and a bad influence on young adults, children, and society in general, mostly basing their claims on very outdated moral ideas, thinking that they had any right to dictate to other people how they should live and what they should be allowed to watch.
Scientific research internationally showing a link between televised and social violence. So,
yes, I do. I think for children under a certain age, it could be very harmful and influence.
The certificate for Rambo is 15, isn't it?
Exactly, which I think is far too young.
Okay, what about you?
Shut the fuck up! Thank you.
There was even a strong movement that tried to ban any and all horror movies, particularly being hung up on the Evil Dead movies because they were apparently so terrifying and bad that these Christians and conservatives could feel the demons actually coming out of the screen. One of these people, during a debate, claimed that his son wet the bed because he was so afraid of these films, which they called video nasties. And of course, because his child couldn't handle a horror movie, that means that this man thought it would only be right if they would be all banned or heavily censored.
My son, spending a Saturday morning with a friend, indeed with two friends, finished up because of the inclement weather, I believe, in the lounge of his friend's home, watching that indescribably evil video, in my view, The Evil Dead. He came home, was unable to eat his meal. We attached no significance to that at all. He later went to bed, and at 2 o'clock in the morning, I was awakened out of a deep sleep to go into my boy's bedroom. He was in a crouched position with his hands between his knees, screeching in fact, a sickening sound, and took a great deal of time composing him. We eventually got through that night. The following night, bearing in mind he's 11 years old, almost 12 years old, he wet his bed.
Swallow this.
No. My position really is that I'm opposed to the freedom of parents to have access to any kind of video nasty and so on, because of a very graphic experience in my own home.
What do you say we have some champagne, huh, baby? Huh?
Sure.
After all, I'm a man and you're a woman. At least last time I checked.
In 1982, under the Obscene Publications Act, police seized 22,000 cassettes in the metropolitan area alone.
Essence of a video is that it is shown in the home. And I'm afraid, people who say, but why shouldn't adults be able to see this kind of thing in their own home? I'm half tempted to say that people who make that kind of demand, knowing that children are likely to see it, aren't really themselves very mature and adult.
Your disease, and I'm the cure.
Die! Drop it!
You know what the trouble with you is? You're too violent.
Rambo 1 was also controversial and claimed to be too violent, which is ironic considering that in the entire movie only one person dies, and that's by accident and not even directly due to Rambo. Rambo himself, surprisingly, does his best to stay as pacifistic as possible and avoids killing. The only reason he gets into a fight with the cops in the first place is because they were clearly abusing him, his rights, and treating him like vermin, clearly not realizing that abusing a former Special Forces soldier who suffers from PTSD and is also built like an absolute machine is a very bad idea. It's really only in the second movie that Rambo turns into the iconic character everyone knows, and it's here that he unleashes his darkness and goes wild on the commies. And once the action hits, it hits damn good. Rambo is a killing machine that won't ever stop, and it really does feel like no bullet can hit him. And should any bullet ever hit his body, it would just crumble to dust, not even leaving a scratch. Rambo goes wild here and doesn't hold back at all. He shows off his creativity and kills his enemies in the most unique ways possible, blending in with the environment and taking them out one by one like a demon from hell. One of the most iconic elements of this movie are the explosive arrows that he made himself and that further show what an insane badass he is. These arrows rip through people like paper and leave nothing alive in their wake, causing massive explosions, rains of blood, and chaos. But also, this is where the iconic image of him running around shirtless with the bandana around his head comes from. And while it may have been parodied and copied countless times ever since, it's still genius and legendary. It's an image that burns itself into your head, especially since we're talking about Stallone in his absolute prime, full of glorious abs and muscles. This movie is the reason so many women want their boyfriends, husbands, and lovers to look like a savage, because it's the ultimate form of badass masculinity. A man running around the jungle, a lone wolf surviving the harsh elements and weather while killing communists without mercy, licking his paws and stalking his prey. Today, this type of story or action might not seem all that exciting or original because it has been done countless times ever since Rambo came out. But this movie is the ground on which all of those action pillars are standing. When it came out, no other movie had this type of unapologetic action and visual appeal. That's not to say that action movies or even violent action movies did not exist before. The spaghetti western movies such as the Clint Eastwood Dollars trilogy is a perfect example of movies that were, at least at the time, perceived as hardcore violent action, and you have to give Clint Eastwood credit for creating a character that basically inspired and influenced the entire action genre to a point where you can see a bit of his character in almost every single action hero ever since, including Rambo.
I don't think it's nice you laughing
And of course, there was a whole load of crime and gangster movies back in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. But Rambo changed the whole genre. Here you have one man that is an absolute killer machine taking on hordes of enemies, a pure one-man army that will never be stopped nor run out of bullets or breath. The scope, the explosions, and fighting choreography as seen in Rambo 2 had never been done before in such a way. It was groundbreaking at the time.
Rambo. What most people call hell, he calls home.
What most people might not realize about the first two Rambo movies is that they were both anti-war movies. In fact, the anti-war elements are not even subtle, often directly spelled out by Rambo or shown through his actions. He is a man who suffers from extreme PTSD due to the Vietnam War, a man whose soul will forever be trapped in Vietnam even if he physically leaves the place. When these movies came out, veteran treatment in the US wasn't that great and there wasn't a lot of treatment against PTSD. In fact, PTSD was not even taken that seriously and research in that area was nowhere near as extensive as it is now. Veterans were often left to their own devices and simply expected to adapt and adjust to civilian life, carrying on as if nothing had happened. Which understandably wasn't exactly an easy thing to do after you witnessed hundreds of firefights, explosions, dead friends and enemies, blood and gore, or saw firsthand the effects of napalm bombs on civilians, the Viet Cong, or even your own men. Truly horrific stuff that no one, not even a man like Rambo, could ever forget, adjust to, or cope with.
Nothing is over! Nothing! You just don't turn it off! It wasn't my war. You asked me, I didn't ask you.
The first movie made the point about how the public was treating these veterans like crap, worst of all coming from cops who are supposed to uphold the law and be a shining example of moral and helpful values, at least in theory.
Come on, don't bullshit me. Bullshit.
The only reason why Rambo's PTSD kicked back in was because of how the public was mistreating him, causing him to snap. And he's just one man out of thousands. Men that had to go through absolute hell because their government told them to, or because they were convinced of fighting for a just cause. They witnessed awful things, and when they return home, they aren't treated as heroes, but as outcasts and villains.
And I see all those maggots at the airport protesting me, spitting, calling me baby killer and all kinds of foul crap.
Had the sheriff and his deputies simply decided to buy him a coffee and a meal, things would probably have turned out completely different. Although in that case, we wouldn't have gotten such an iconic character causing chaos, so you could say that the sheriff here is the sole reason for the existence of the Rambo franchise and his never-ending battle with PTSD. Now, the second movie focuses less on his trauma and more on Rambo as a person, as well as on the rescue of American soldiers held in Viet Cong prison camps. At the time of this movie's release, there were a lot of myths and rumors making the rounds about Americans still being stuck in Vietnam with no one coming to rescue them. Some of these rumors were false, others turned out to be right. Rambo decides to go back to save them, not for America or some kind of ideology, but because of his personal morals and values as a soldier and warrior. He goes back to save them because they are his brothers and the only people who can understand what he is going through. The movie makes a point of blaming bureaucracy and corrupt politicians for a lot of the issues caused in Vietnam, and after it, and even Rambo himself mentions his dislike for all the government suits.
You know there's more men out there. You know where they are. Find them, or I'll find you.
RoboCop is not only one of the best movies ever made, but it's also one of the most important influences on the cyberpunk genre, next to movies such as Blade Runner or Total Recall. Despite coming out 30 years ago, it still feels fresh for the most part, and the message and themes it tried to convey are still relevant, maybe even more than they have ever been. It's an amazing movie that not only manages to have a great story, but also great action, great heroes, and villains.
RoboCop, the future of law enforcement.
What I love about this movie is how it feels like a superhero origin story. It has all the elements you'd also see in Marvel or DC movies and comics, and I could easily see RoboCop being part of the Avengers or Justice League. Of course, then those stories would need to be much more violent and twisted, as RoboCop doesn't pull any punches at all. I was actually surprised how dark and violent the movie was, in particular how gory. It's not exactly horror or slasher levels of gore, but it definitely is not afraid of showing extreme violence, such as people getting their limbs blown off or tortured. It's very dark, but you almost don't notice this darkness or violence until it happens because of the more light-hearted and comic tone that the movie also has. It balances the humor with the violence masterfully, but the inclusion of humor, or rather a certain light-hearted, almost parody-like element, makes the movie a lot more twisted than you think.
Nuke 'em. Get them before they get you. Another quality home game from Butler Brothers.
I'd buy that for $1.
Because this humor isn't meant to give you a good time or make you laugh like action comedies or normal comedies usually intend. In the case of RoboCop, it's meant to be a satirical parody of real life, showing how dark modern society can be, where one moment you hear about acts of violence and the next you see an ad for sunscreen or World of Tanks being shoved down your throat.
Sunblock 5000. Protection for the new age.
The world of RoboCop is beyond screwed up, taking place in Detroit where crime is at an all-time high. The police are clearly struggling hard with the situation, and cops keep dying daily. Despite being heavily armored and armed already, it's obvious that the city needs some other solution, and so one of the most powerful, corrupt and crony companies called the OCP decides to create robotic machines that will arrest and kill anyone committing crime.
209. We can expect 209 to become the hot military product for the next decade.
Dick, I'm very disappointed.
I'm sure it's only a glitch. A temporary setback.
You call this a glitch?
Of course, a showcase of the first prototype goes horribly wrong, and the company decides for an even darker solution, fusing humans with robotic parts rather than creating a full machine. What's crazy about this is just how corrupt and evil the OCP is, almost on a fascist level, a comparison that becomes even more evident considering their logo literally looks like the flag of the Third Reich. After a man gets torn apart by a failed machine, the company's first thoughts are not about the dead man, but rather about the fact that the showcase failed and how much money was lost. The entire movie is supposed to be satire, which is why a lot of moments feel like parody and why the humor sometimes seems out of place. That was intentional. The movie makes fun of typical 80s action movies that had over-the-top violence and action with macho characters whose entire line of thought was that more and bigger guns solve every problem.
The trouble with you is you're too violent.
This is one of the reasons why there is so much blood and gore in the movie. Anytime someone gets shot or blown up, it's heavily exaggerated and doesn't seem realistic at all, which is in line with a lot of cliches and tropes that were popular in the 80s. In RoboCop, a character such as Alex Murphy can get shot over a dozen times by very heavy weapons, get his limbs blown apart and still live. People can lose their hands and barely even scream as if it's nothing but a scratch. The movie criticizes the idea that more and heavier guns will solve crime or lower it. The villains here are genuinely evil and sadistic. They get no sad backstory, there are no moments where the movie makes us feel anything but hate or contempt for them. Their only goals are to steal, kill, and cause as much chaos as they can. They don't deserve our sympathy, they don't deserve our mercy. They are scum and there is only one cure for them.
You probably don't think I'm a very nice guy, do you?
Buddy, I think you're slime.
If RoboCop had been made today, then these villains would have most likely gotten some sort of sad backstory to let us understand how and why they turned this evil. You can see this trend today where there are movies and TV shows dedicated specifically to villains such as Cruella or the Penguin. Now, I don't think that's a bad thing. The Penguin TV show in particular is really good and fun, and at the end of the day, it all depends on whether the writers and directors are competent or not. But it's interesting to see how RoboCop does not bother to do any of that. It portrays villains and corrupt individuals as what they really are, and it also highlights how there will never be an actual cure or solution for and against these people. Evil and sadistic humans will always exist as long as humanity has not nuked itself. The idea that more guns or deadly machines will cut down crime is nonsense because there will always be outlaws and troublemakers. It's why RoboCop ultimately, even after defeating the villains of this story, doesn't actually solve anything. He didn't cut down on crime, he just removed a bunch of evil people whose spot was instantly taken by the next group of evil assholes. Having said that, looking past all of the parody and satire, the action in RoboCop is still amazing and a lot of fun to watch. In a way, Robo reminds me of a reverse Terminator, where instead of being specifically made to kill, he actually has to uphold the law and protect the innocent. As morally dark and wrong as his creation and existence is, he himself was programmed to be a hero and a good guy. He does kill when he has to, often in extremely bloody ways, but he also tries to avoid doing so if he can. For most of the movie, he's an unstoppable machine, not stopping even when shot upon, being mostly bulletproof.
Dead or alive, you are coming with me. Your move, creep.
Alex Murphy is a very interesting character. In many ways, his character fits the typical action hero of the 80s. He has a sense of duty, is religious, and also a cowboy who likes the thrill of the action. We don't actually get that much character development for him as Alex Murphy specifically. In fact, Alex Murphy as a human barely gets any character development, but what we do get is more than enough. Despite having so little screen time, he still manages to come across as likable and a decent person.
Role models can be very important to a boy.
Pharmaceutical company on blind.
Okay, I get a kick out of it.
Which is extremely important considering his fate. When he gets turned into RoboCop after being brutally shot to pieces by gangsters, we feel for him even more because we got to see his previous self. We got to experience him as a human, so watching him as a machine for the rest of the movie is a feeling of pity, sadness, and even anger. Anger because you know exactly that something like this could happen in real life. Sure, we might not be on the technological level of fusing humans and machines the way it's shown in this movie for now, but we'd certainly already reached a level of moral decay and corrupt crony business practices. People that would turn humans into cyborgs, not caring about the person itself and only caring about the money, fame, and social status it will give them, already exist. In fact, they exist in droves, licking their greedy paws just waiting for an opportunity or experiment like is shown in this movie.
There will come a point where no job is needed. You can have a job if you want to have a job for sort of personal satisfaction, but the AI will be able to do everything. So,
your company built the fucking thing. Now I gotta deal with it? I don't have time for this bullshit.
It's a topic that has also been masterfully explored in BioShock, where a lack of regulations and rules caused the downfall of Rapture, but also led to some extremely twisted and fucked up human experiments and addictions. I will be honest, seeing Murphy be turned into RoboCop hit me really deep. Anytime he's hurt or slowly remembering his past life, I almost feel the same way as when you see a helpless animal or child being hurt or abused. It makes you feel more anger and pity for them than if you saw a grown human experience the same thing. And maybe I'm just screwed up myself, I don't deny that, but part of me felt more sympathy towards Robo because he felt like something else, neither human nor machine, almost like an alien entity, which was of course also the intent of this movie. It's deeply philosophical despite all of the action going on. It makes you wonder what defines a human and what defines a machine.
I can feel them. But I can't remember them.
With a touch of elegance. Hey, have you thought it all over? Why not make me an offer?
Since the movie's release, there have been a lot of discussions going on about whether RoboCop was still Alex Murphy or an entirely new being. Some people claim that Murphy died and that this machine simply has his brain and memories but doesn't know how to handle and deal with them. Personally, I disagree heavily with the idea that RoboCop is not Murphy. They are one and the same, changed of course, but still the same. If Robo has Murphy's brain and memories, then he is still that person. His brain has never been disconnected from him, nor did the OCP manage to erase all of his memories. Sure, they did remove almost all of his body parts and turned him into a machine, but it's still Murphy. He is a changed person, and you could make the argument that he's therefore someone new. And that would be true. But it's still Murphy fundamentally. It's still his brain and his memories. It's amazing to me how deep this movie is, despite at first glance seeming like just another action movie. A lot of this is due to the great soundtrack. The main theme here is iconic, but it also sounds heroic and sad at the same time. It fits perfectly to the story and is one of those themes that gets stuck in your head for a while. This is coupled with the great performances from all the actors, but especially from Peter Weller playing RoboCop. The other actors do a fantastic job, the villains are fun and memorable, but Robo is the main star of the show. And to me, it's simply mind-blowing how Weller manages to convey a large range of emotions despite his character mostly talking in a very dry and emotionless tone.